Hey guys, welcome to INLIT Academy, and today we're going to talk about the age of Elizabeth. So previously we've seen the age of Chaucer and now we're coming to age of Elizabeth. This is known as a golden age. During this age there are a lot of writings done. It was considered the golden age and it starts from 1550 to 1620. Remember this is during the reign of Elizabeth. It's from 1550 to 1620. So, age of Shakespeare, the highlights of it, right? So, it basically Elizabeth becomes the queen in 1558 and it goes on to James' death in 1625. So long as Elizabethan period. Of course, it starts with Elizabeth's birth, coming to the throne, and then it stops with the death of James. So almost 67 years of the age and is divided into three divisions. So first 21 years of the Queen's reign, and then it's the second 24 years between the publication of Spencer Shepherd's calendar and her death. So this is the first phase, 21 years, second phase is 24 years, and the third phase is 22 years of the reign of James. So we already mentioned that starts with Elizabeth and it ends with James. So we have divided into the 67 years. First is 21 years, next is 24 years, and then it is 22 years. So the many people thought like this is one of the greatest ages. So some people even called it every breeze was dusty with the pollen of Greece, Rome, and of Italy. That means the writers during this time were greatly influenced by Greek, Roman, and Italian literature. All those concepts came into England, and now all these writers started writing their literary works based on Greek, Roman, and Italian. Next. So, of course, during this time, we all know they all went for these big voyages. They started discovering lot of places, and it was an age of exploration, if you understand what I mean. So, next one is intense patriotism. They all finally found that they were British, they were English, that they found this great patriotism. And of course, as literature talks about culture and history, right, it reflects. So when we read the literary works, we can understand the British patriotism there. And then it is an age in which men lived intensely, thought intensely, and wrote intensely. This was not like this normal age. People started writing very well, they were thinking highly, and during this time science started flourishing and exploration started becoming greater and greater during this time. So, next, what are the characteristics of the Elizabethan age? Some small outline points so you understand what kind of age was Elizabethan age, right? So, during this time there was a religious war and it was called the 30 Years' War. These are all historical backgrounds, and you should understand it was divided into north and south. North was basically a Catholic side, and same way the southern side was Protestant. We all know that Catholics and Protestants did not get along, and during this time Britain was, when a king is Catholic, mostly they will suppress the Protestants, but if somebody in the headship is the Protestant, then they will suppress the Catholics. So it was like both the teams fighting for each other. So this is the 30 Years' War. North, it was Catholic. South, it was Protestant. And of course, the Spanish Armada, Britain became the rulers of the sea after defeating the Spanish Armada. It was a big story that you might have read in your social history. Basically, the British Navy seems to be ruling the seas by this time. So rapid increase of manufacturing towns gave employment to thousands. Now what is happening is people are starting to come from villages to the main places and rapid employment is going on. And then trade brought enormous wealth to England. Of course, people started going in the ships to other countries. Now because of this trade started growing again and again. So passes were made responsible for their own poor and wealth were taxed to support them or give them employment. Now all these parishes, that is the churches, were made responsible. They looked after their own people. They started giving them jobs and employment. So these are some of the characteristics of the Elizabethan age. And next, it is an age of dreams and adventure, as we already mentioned. This was a great age to be alive in. They were having dreams, they were writing well, they were thinking well, and springing from the new lands of fabulous riches revealed by English explorers. As we know, these people started moving all around the world. They saw many places. Now they are coming back, and now they understand many things. They are taking from other cultures things. Trade has become flourished, and of course, Hakluyt wrote a work which deals with his voyages, collection of voyages, such as his pilgrims. So all kinds of works started coming out of this. And here we see this person writing these works explores us a new world for the fountain of youth. Her poets are creating literary works. Now all these Elizabethan period writers are basically searching for the fountain of youth, in which you go and drink, you never get old. That is the mythology behind it. Now, Cabot, Drake, Froschiber, Gilbert, Whale, Willoughby, Hawkins, all these guys, a score of explorers reveal a new earth to men's eyes. All these explorers go out and bring in a lot of experience to the British. Next, Elizabethan poetry. You should understand Elizabethan age poetry begins with Spenser, but before Spenser there were some guys. Thomas Ackland, who wrote Induction, and then Lord Buckhurst, a mayor for magistrates, Lydgate, Falls of Princes, George Gascoigne, Steel Glass. Now you understand all these. Maybe Thomas Ackland and Lydgate are major poets, but Lord Buckhurst and George Gascoigne is not so famous. They are minor writers, but still these are their more important works. Induction, Falls of Princes, Steel Glass, and all these things. Now I understand this is before Spenser, but now we have to see Spenser, who is very, very important for this age. Now, Spenser and his poetry. Okay. Edmund Spenser was born during 1552 to 1599. When was he born? 1552 to 1599. During this time he was born. And now you should understand, right? His love of beauty and his exquisite melody caused him to be known as poet's poet. As we mentioned in other videos, you would see that he's called the father of poetry, the great critic. All these words are given. Similarly, for Edmund Spenser, he's called the poet's poet. Why? He was so beautiful. I mean, his poetry was full of exquisite melody, and everyone knew him as poet's poet. Next, his life and work seem to center around about three great influences. Some great names were included in this. So, what kind of influence he had? First, it was Cambridge. He was born and brought up in Cambridge, where he grew acquainted with the classics and the Italian poets. In Cambridge, he came across Italian poets, and that was his first influence, because we are talking about three influences that he had. The first influence was at Cambridge, where he learned classics and the Italian poets, everything he learned during this time. So next one you see is Cambridge, then London, where he experienced the glamour and the disappointment of court life. We all know that court life was in London. It was a thriving city. Everybody came there, everybody was there. And now, because of staying in London, he experienced all the great glamour, but also the disappointment of a court life. And finally, if you see at the end of his life, he is at Ireland, which steeped him in the beauty and imagery of old Celtic poetry and first gave him leisure to write his masterpiece. Only when he went to Ireland, he was able to write his masterpiece called The Faerie Queene. So first he had stayed in Cambridge, got some experience, then he moved to London, and finally he moved to Ireland, where he wrote his great masterpiece. Next, of course, he was born in East Smithfield, and he was a merchant tailor school. He studied in Cambridge. As we know, he was first in Cambridge, so he studied in that school. Of course, he read the classics, he read all the great Italian poets, and he wrote numerous little poems. Everybody starts with writing small. And he called Chaucer was his beloved master. He learned many things from Chaucer, but his ambition was not to write something as grand as Canterbury Tales. He wanted a different method, not to simply copy Chaucer, but rather to express the dream of English chivalry, much as Aristo had done for Italy and Orlando for his own. Aristo had written this work in Italian, so he saw that idea and he wanted to write about knights, things, English chivalry, all this, and that's when he writes Fairy Queen. Okay, and finally, North of England, on some unknown work or quest, fall in love. The record is melancholy over the lost Rosalind in the Shepherd's Calendar. During his visit to Ireland, that is north of England, there he sits and writes Shepherd's Calendar. So now itself we have acquainted ourselves with some of his works. One is Shepherd's Calendar and next is Fairy Queen. Okay. Now, his friend Harvey is advising him to come to England. We already saw he was in Cambridge, then he moved to London, then he moved to Ireland. So in London, he was advised by his friend to come to London. During this time, he met Leicester. Here he finished his Shepherd's Calendar, 1579. In London, he finished Shepherd's Calendar. And then he met Sydney and all the Queen's favourites. Now he is a part of the court. He is meeting many people. And in 1580, he becomes secretary to Lord Grey, who was a parliamentarian, and he becomes a secretary to Lord Grey, the Queen's deputy in Ireland. So he accompanied his chief through one campaign of savage brutality in putting down an Irish rebellion. In Ireland there was a fight. At that time he helped to appease the rebellion. And finally, given an immense estate with a castle of Kilcoman in Manchester, he is given a big castle there, and which had been confiscated from Earl Desmond, one of the Irish leaders. During this rebellion, there was this Irish rebellion, right? So during this time, a castle was confiscated from this Earl Desmond, and it was given to whom? Spencer. Okay, this castle comes to Spencer. And after 16 years residence, he wrote View of the State of Ireland. Because he moved to Ireland, now he writes this wonderful prose work, View of the State of Ireland. Because what is the situation in Ireland, he writes, in which he submits a plan for pacifying the oppressed and rebellious people. There is a lot of political problems there, so he's telling, okay, we can solve this problem, and he writes this works as an answer to it. And finally, in Kilcoman, there is the palace, right? Surrounded by great natural beauty. Spencer finished the first 3 books of Fairy Queen. Okay, first 3 books were written in his palace. Then, Ray visited him, heard the poem with enthusiasm, hurried the poet off to London and presented him to Elizabeth. When he had finished the 3 books, Ray comes and takes him back to London and he shows it to Elizabeth. Then Elizabeth gives him like yearly pension of £50. Yearly pension of £50 was conferred by Elizabeth, but rarely paid. Of course, it was said that we'll pay you, but it was rarely paid. It was not given properly. The poet turned back to exile, that is to Ireland again. Again he moved to Ireland. So he was in Ireland, he comes here, he shows it to the Queen and moves back to Ireland. Now, of course, Spencer fell in love with his beautiful Elizabeth, that is his wife, that is an Irish girl, not the Queen, okay? Now, Irish girl wrote his Amority during this time. Their Amority is basically sonnets, 88 sonnets. Amority has 88 sonnets in her honor, and 4 hymns. So we have seen like Shepherd's Calendar, Amority, Fairy Queen, 4 hymns. So like 4 words. Then represented her in the Fairy Queen as a beautiful woman dancing among the girls. Even in Fairy Queen, he talks about this girl. Okay, and then in 1595 he married her, celebrating his wedding with this epithalamium. So marrying her, he wrote this work. One of the most beautiful wedding hymns. Okay, in any language, epithalamium is one of the best. London in 1595 he published Astrophil. He published at this time an elegy on the death of his friend Sydney. For Sydney, he writes an elegy, Astrophil. Okay. For Philip Sidney, he writes this Astrophil as a elegy. And 3 more books of Fairy Queen. Now, totally how many books have been written on Fairy Queen? 6 books have been written. Now, lived again in Leicester House, now occupied by a new favorite Essex, where he probably met Shakespeare. We are not sure, but he might have met Shakespeare during this time when he was here. Okay, and the other literary lights of the Elizabethan age. Of course, finally he moves to England. Now, during this time, it was a lot of problems for him, and these are all extra things, okay, that you want to know. So we'll move to the next one. Spencer's works. We have already seen a lot of works. Now his major work, Fairy Queen. Fairy Queen is the major work. Basically, original plan thought of writing 24 books, but he was not able to complete it. It was a long book. Each of which was to recount the adventure and triumph of a knight. So same in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, we meet a knight. The same way, in his story, each knight would go on an adventure. That's what he's trying to say. It was purely allegorical. He wanted to tell something with telling something. That is, struggle between good and evil. He wanted to show this. And finally, he differs radically from Orlando Furioso. We already saw that Italian work, right? From his model only he copied. But he wanted to change. He didn't want to be like that exact model. Upon which it was modeled. Spencer completed only 6 books. Out of 21, he completed only 6 books. Celebrating all these things. Holiness, temperance, chastity, friendship, justice, courtesy, all these things were given like characteristic features and written in the book. We'll see that later. Now, fragment of the 7, treating of constancy, rest not written, perhaps burned in fire. While he wrote all these works, maybe in the palace it was burnt up. Many works he might have written, but it's not found for us. So remember, Fairy Queen, 24 books. Out of that, how many works are found? Only 6. And now, here is the thing. Basically, hero is on a quest. The queen gives him a job and he goes on a quest and he comes back victorious. That's the story. The journey is the story. Okay. Now, on each day, some distressed person appears unexpectedly. Every day to the court, somebody is coming and telling, this happened, a girl is lost, you have to go. So, the one brave knight goes to say. So, it tells a woeful story of dragons, enchantress, distressed beauty, or virtue. Somebody will come and tell some problem and then they will go. Ask for a champion to right the wrong. That is the knight. They'll ask the knight to go and rescue them, so they'll go and rescue it. So these are the journey. The journey and adventure of these knights are the subjects of the book. So all this journey is basically the subject of the book. Now we should know some references. What is there in this, right? First recounts the adventure of Red Cross Knight. The first story will talk about Red Cross Knight. He represents holiness. We already saw holiness, chastity and all these things. Red Cross represents holiness. And the other lady, the Lady Una, she is representing religion. So it is using as a what? Say, we already said symbolism is an allegory. Complete thing is an allegory, okay? It represents religion. The second book tells the story of Sir Gawain or temperance. So first one is Red Cross Knight, holiness. Sir Gawain, that is temperance. And then the third is Britomartis, representing chastity. Okay, so first is holiness, temperance, chastity. We already saw. The fourth, Campbell and Triamond as friendship, because 2 people are involved. So friendship, it talks about friendship. Fifth one, Artigal, justice. Okay, it talks about justice. And sixth, Sir Calendro, courtesy. So these are the knights' name: Sir Gawain, Britomartis, Campbell and Triamond, Artigal and Sir Calendro. All these things are knights' names and each go after one of them. Of course, he did not complete 24 books, he completed only 6 books. So this is the thing. Now, we have to understand, sometimes the characters overlap. Britomartis is also Elizabeth. He keeps changing their things. Red Cross Knight is Sydney. He writes for Sydney. Arthur, who's the head of all these things, right? Who always appeared to rescue the oppressed is Leicester, his friend who helped him out. So Dulza represents Mary Queen of Scots. So basically she's an evil woman in the story. But political reasons are it refers to Mary Queen of Scots. And then in the last three books, Elizabeth appears again as Marcella in the last three books. Finally, Henry IV of France as Bourbon. Okay, so all these things we can know. Of course, allegory becomes so difficult to follow as the second part of God's past. There are many references. Mostly, every time we read only the first part, the second and third were not so popular, but the first Red Cross Night is very famous. Okay, Muna, Loser, all these things. So remember the story, there were 24 and only 6 were written. And each one is an allegory of some virtue. And virtue refers to the knights. Okay, all these things. For the fairy queen, Spencer started a new verse form, Spenserian stanza. He started writing his own verse form. Okay, and an improved form of Octaverama. We already know he copied his work to fairy queen. Okay, all these things. So last line is Alexandrian. Census stanza is 9 lines, 8 of 5 feet each, and the last 6 feet, rhyming AB, BC, BCC. So this is the rhyming scheme. Finally, the last line is called an Alexandrine. Remember, you might ask these questions. So what is the last line called as? Alexandrine in Spencer's form. So remember that. Hi everyone, welcome to INLIT Academy. Now we are going to continue with the age of Shakespeare, but now we are going to talk about the drama part alone. We have already seen the poetry part, now we are seeing the most important part, that is the drama. Now, first, before getting into Shakespeare, because Shakespeare is the key dramatist there, but before him, there were some people called the university wits. So university wits are these people. These people were all had a university education, and they wrote wonderful plays which acted as a model for Shakespeare. Their works basically were derived from all this Italian and all these things, because they were educated in Oxford. They were prone to know other languages. They were influenced by other languages as well. And of course, I told you they were called the university wits because they were men of academic training. They had very good talent and they wrote a lot of work. Now, they are John Lilly, Thomas Kidd, George Peele, Thomas Lodge, Robert Greene, Christopher Marlowe, and Thomas Nash. So another easy way to remember is like there are many Johns and there will be like many of the Thomases, so you can remember them easily. So first we are talking about John Lilly, Thomas Kidd, George Peele, Thomas Lodge, Robert Greene, Christopher Marlowe. Of course, in this, Christopher Marlowe is the most important writer per se, and let's start with each of them. First, let's get into John Lilly. John Lilly is author of a prose romance entitled Ephesus. It's a prose romance, it's a kind of a big work, and he wrote Ephesus. Then he writes 8 comedies, Campassi, Endymion, and Galatea. They are the best ones. Of course, he has written 8, but these are the best ones. If you know these things, it's enough. And then he is written for performance at the court. I already said these were Oxford educated, Cambridge educated. They mostly prefer to do it in front of the Queen. That's what they were doing. And interest on language. They wanted to see how language can be used, how to dramatize all these things. He used lot of puns and conceits. Puns are like jokes, so insider jokes. Like people will understand when they talk it and act out. Shakespeare, as we all know, learned how to combine a courtly main plot with episodes of rustic blunders and clownish things. Basically, from John Lilly, he learned this. If you see, as you like it, you can understand there is the court scene and then we go to the village scene. This kind of mixtures and all, he learnt it from John Lilly. And then in comedy, he is Shakespeare's first master. To learn comedy, it was very important that he read John Lilly. As we said, they were the predecessors to Shakespeare himself. Now, another important writer almost can be matched to Shakespeare himself, but he did not live for a long time, and that is Christopher Marlowe. Christopher Marlowe was born in Canterbury, son of a poor shoemaker, okay? But he had this wonderful talent to write wonderful dramas. 23 years old, he produced Tamburlaine. It was a great dramatic work. Tamburlaine was produced just when he was 23 years old. And then his plays abound in violence, no doubt reflecting many of the violent scenes in which he lived. Of course, all his plays showed all these violent things and all. But he was killed in a drunken brawl. They fought, somebody stabbed him at just the age of 29, he was dead. But he had produced some 6 plays which are universally known, especially Faustus, it's a very important work of his. And so, as I already said, Faustus is a very well known play. Okay, it's his second play. After Tamburlaine, it's the second play. So, what happens? Everybody knows the story. There's a guy who wants infinite knowledge, so he makes a deal with the devil, and the devil is asking for his soul. But there is 25 years of whatever he wants to do, he can do it. But there is this conflict between good and bad, evil things. So that's happening within him day in and day out. That's happening day in and day out. And finally, it's too late to turn from his bad ways. He can only go through the things, and finally he gets to hell. That's Faust's story. But Faust comes from God's Faust, and he gets the plot idea, and then he moves on. So learn magic, he sells himself to the devil for 24 years. That's the storyline. Now, then the third play is Jew of Malta. We have seen Tamburlaine, Faustus, and Jew of Malta. Jew of Malta is basically a lust for wealth, centers around about Barabbas. So it talks about Barabbas. This guy is having a lust for lots and lots of money. This Jew wants to have a lot of money. That's the Jew of Malta. The last play is Edward II. It's about a tragic story of king's weakness and misery. This is a historical drama. So we have seen Tamburlaine, we have seen Faustus, then Jew of Malta and Edward II. Marlowe is the only dramatist of the time who is ever compared to Shakespeare. There is no other comparison with Shakespeare except Marlowe, because he is mighty lines. They used to tell his mighty lines, a very grand style, and he had a lot of talent, but unfortunately he died at a very young age. So next, man of fierce imagination killed in a drunken brawl, as I already said. So his works we have already seen: Tamburlaine the Great, Dr. Faustus, the Jew of Malta, Edward II. And he also introduced blank verse to the romantic drama. Blank verse to the romantic drama. Now, he's written all the other works like Hero and Leander, Venus and Adonis, Richard II, Richard III. And basically what happens is, there's a comparison between Shakespeare's work and the other work. So we can see a comparison. Hero and Leander is written by our wonderful Marlowe, whereas Shakespeare wrote the same thing as Venus and Adonis. The same way Richard II story, and that is Edward II story, that is Richard II and Richard III by Shakespeare. Then the Jew of Malta, almost similar characteristics can be found in Merchant of Venice. So there's a comparison there. And then, now we are going to the main person. First we have seen John Lilly, then we have seen Christopher Marlowe, and now we are seeing Shakespeare himself. First you should understand, we are not going too much of Shakespeare's life. We are talking about only important things. First he was an actor, then second he was a reviser of old plays. So basically he started as an actor, he was acting and doing all this. Then he used to take old plays and revise it, change it, and finally, last, he was an independent dramatist. He started writing his own. So it's a gradual growth. First he just acts, then he revises these plays, and finally he becomes an independent dramatist. Of course, Shakespeare was baptized on 26th of April, everybody knows this, and 23rd he was born at Stratford-on-Avon. These are his life things. His father, John Shakespeare, was a farmer's son. Mother was Mary Arden. These things are his life, but for examination point of view, these will not be relevant. We need to focus on the works, and we need to focus on what kind of person was Shakespeare and what kind of influence it had on the literary world. Now, So we can see, first let's talk about his non-dramatic poetry, not dramas. First, it's Venus and Adonis. This was dedication to the Earl of, dedicated to the Earl of Southampton. And Venus and Adonis is a non-dramatic poem. Then Rape of Lucrece. This is also a wonderful work, but it's not dramatic thing. And of course, he's written lots of sonnets, and he's written totally 154 sonnets. Remember, 154 sonnets? In that, 126 addressed to a man, we don't know who. Reminders are addressed to a woman, we don't know that lady also, we call her the dark lady. So that is, the remaining ones are written for her. Record of passionate history of disastrous love and broken friendship. About friendship, disaster, love are all written in this 154 sonnets. So when you read it, you'll know it. Then of course, he's written 24 plays. There is almost like 37 plays. Total number of plays are 37. Of course, some plays are not completed, whereas his people who followed him completed it. Bellman, Fletcher, and all these guys. Now, he's a writer for 24 years. He was writing continuously. Because as we have seen, first he was an actor, then slowly revised, and finally he wrote. First 12 years belong to 16th century, next 12 years to the 17th century. At the end of the 16th century, he was started it, and at the beginning of the 17th century, he was going to finish all his works. Now, if you see all these things, we already said begins with the revision of old plays. That is, his first comedy's influence of Lily. Because of Lily's influence, he started writing. If you can see, it begins with the revision of old plays. Henry IV, Henry VI, Three Parts, Titus Andronicus, Romeo and Juliet, all these works come under this. And the similarly influenced of Lily, he writes all these works. For example, Love, Slave, Lost, Two Gentlemen of Verona, Comedy of Errors, Midsummer Night's Dream. All these plays are very playful, they are comical, they are very grand, they have a lot of thought in it as such, but when you go to a second period, right, it becomes more advanced. Because in the early stages, he was mostly influenced by others and he wrote comedies just to entertain people. But when you go to his tragedies, there's more depth. Okay, so you can see here, period of comedies and chronicle plays. Richard II, King John, Merchant of Venice, Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, Henry V, Taming of Shrew, Merry Wives of Windsor, Much Ado But Nothing, As You Like It, Plot 9. These are all the next phase works. But here you can see he gets in more history out here. There were more comedies here, more of a history, but his work are slowly becoming very, very independent. Rather than influenced by Lily or somebody, now they're becoming very independent. Now, here comes his greatest plays. His tragedies are the most revered ones because they teach a lot about human psychology and all these things. And starts with Julius Caesar, Hamlet, All's Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, Troilus and Cressida. We have seen in Chaucer, Cressidi, right? But it's almost same thing. He got influenced and he wrote here. Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra, Coriolanus, Timon of Athens. All these works. Actually, if you see, Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, these are the four most important tragedies ever to be written, and they have a lot of depth. Four tragedies as such. And then comedies, later comedies. Now, the thing about later comedies is that he was having a serious life. By the end of his life, he becomes very wise. They are most satirical. In comedy, in sense, it's not like simple comedies, they are satirical problems of life. For example, Simplon, Tempest, Winter's Tale, Persiles, and Henry VIII. All these works show that life, fragility of life, but in a comical way, and he talks about some really great issues because he's coming to the end of his life. So we understand from this. And decline of Shakespeare's dramatic powers. But compared to his older works, these works will not be so grand because his dramatic powers are getting lower. Now, invested his money and soon became a part owner of the Globe and Blackfriars. Of course, he made a lot of money by all his plays. Then he bought his own theatre. He started as an actor, But finally he was a theatre owner himself, the Globe. And now, Shakespeare work, something related to Shakespeare work, right? Supreme as dramatist and poet, he was a great dramatist. It's an astonishing variety. It's not only one story, like he can write tragedies, he can write comedies, he can write romances, he can write histories and all kinds of variety. That's one of the points. Then supreme as a dramatist and poet. Of course, his dramas are dramas, but at the end of the day, when you read his works, they are poetic. So you should understand that. Most often quoted. Of course, he's quoted a lot. He has created so many characters, men and women, in his works, and plays are remarkable for their general truth. This is very, very important because all his plays give a general truth to everybody. What is life about? Design his plays for the stage. Of course, he didn't simply write plays, he wanted to entertain people. He designed it for the stage, the scenes and all these things. Now, let's get into the next one of Shakespeare. Now, we have seen John Lely, Christopher Marlowe, Shakespeare, and now we are going to Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson is a contemporary, but Shakespeare actually broke. Next, we are talking about Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson, see, Shakespeare actually broke all the rules. He mixed comedy, romances, everything. But then Ben Jonson was kind of classist. He followed the rules and stuff. Now, his works are very important. First, he fought against the romantic tendency of the age and to restore the classical standard. That's what I said. So Shakespeare was breaking all the rules, but he wanted to keep all the rules intact. So his works, Jonson's first comedy is Every Man in His Humour. This is a very important work. Every Man in His Humour is the key to all his dramas. First of 3 satires. He wrote a lot of satires. Okay, first of 3 satires. The word humour in his age stood for some characteristics, quality of the society. Humour in the sense not like now. It's not like a joke. It means a different thing. Second, Cynthia reveals, satire the humours of the court. So this is the second one. Every Man in His Humour, Cynthia's reveals. Okay, this is the next one. And then, the poet taster, the result of a quarrel with contemporaries. He was fighting with other people, right, that time. So that is the poet taster, or poet taster. 3 best known of Jonson's comedies are, of course, everybody would have heard this, Wolfone or the Fox. The first one, The Alchemist, and then Epicurean or the Silent Woman, okay, so Wolfone, Alchemist, the Silent Woman. Remember these 3, they are very well known works. Of course, everybody would have known Wolfone is a man who is governed by overwhelming love of money. For the love of money, he will do a lot of things and he'll try to cheat, he'll do all kinds of things. But sweeten his last moments by giving him his present so that he will leave them all his wealth. But who's working for him will be trying to get all the money from him. He'll be trying to cheat somebody, but somebody will be trying to cheat him. That's Wolfone. And Alchemist, of course, Philosopher's Stone idea. They will be cheating people that they have the Philosopher's Stone. That's the storyline. And the same way, Silent Woman. The 2 great tragedies he wrote, Sejanus and Hadrian. He wrote a lot of humors, comedies and all, but he definitely wrote 2 tragedies there. That is Sejanus and Hadrian. He wrote many masks. Masks were those times very famous because we can see next stage, Milton too having all these masks. So masks, the Queen and the Satyr, the Penates, Mask of Blackness, Mask of Beauty, Hue and Cry, Africa, and the Mask of Queen. He wrote so many masks. Okay, so these are all his works. Now we are talking about Ben Jonson. Of course, he was thrown into prison because some passages in the comedy of Eastward Ho, his another work is Eastward Ho, gave offense to King James. So some passages talked about King James, so he was thrown into prison for writing Eastward Ho. He was in a danger of a horrible death after having his ears and nose cut off. Because he did such a thing, they just cut his ears and nose to not make him write anything. Then Chapman and Marston first cast into prison as the authors of Eastward Ho. Basically what happened was they thought Eastward Ho was written by these guys and they were put into jail. Then, and rough Ben Jonson at once declared that he too had a small hand in the writing and went to join them in prison. First these 2 people were put in prison and then he joins along with them and he gets to prison. Okay. And the poems and songs, of course, we have seen his tragedies, his comedies, his all these works. Now, his poems and songs, the triumph of cherish, bring to me only with thine eyes, and to the memory of my beloved mother. These are all his songs. Single volume of prose. He wrote one volume of prose called Timber, or Discoveries Made Upon Men and Matter. This is a prose work. He is an interesting collection of short essays, very short essays. He started writing all these things. Now, we are coming to the other dramatists. We have seen all the major dramatists. Lily, Rousseau, Marlowe, Shakespeare, and Ben Jonson. Now we are going to the other ones, very small ones. But a tragedy means you have to remember John Webster's work. White Devil, that's the money. You cannot forget this. He is very important, as he said. His dramas were staged in a way it was very brutal. Murder scenes and all these scenes will not be shown on stage. But he broke that thing, and it used to be like gruesome. Murders, ghosts, all these things he brought in the play, Webster. And then John Ford, The Broken Heart. Okay, these are all minor dramatists, but one work will be very famous. And Francis Beaumont and John Fletcher. Remember Beaumont and John Fletcher because these guys took Marlowe's work, Shakespeare work, unfinished work, and they made it complete. John Fletcher and Francis Beaumont. This was their job. Philister, the Maid's Tragedy, was their work. Now, Philip Massenger wrote a wonderful work called New Way to Pay Old Debts. The Great Duke of Florence, The Virgin Matter, The Maid of Honor. High level in comedy. He was very good, but these are all minor dramatists. Obviously, if Shakespeare was not there, these people would have got more time there, but no, they didn't understand. James Shirley, he wrote a wonderful work. Now, The Last of the Great Race, that's his work. The Last of the Great Race, okay? Charles Lamb's. Now, old creative power at one stage has yielded completely to the fast-spreading immortality of the age. Of course, the old dramatists were gone, now it was all changing. But by this time, there will come an age, like after some certain years, the parliament will be changed and all this will be closed because of the Puritan image. So next page that is. Now Thomas Middleton, very important writer. His best known two great plays are Changeling and Woman Beware Woman. Woman Beware Woman, Changeling. A Trick to Catch the Old One, his best comedy. A Fair Girl, his earliest tragedies. Remember these? And of course, Thomas Haywood. Thomas Haywood, A Woman Killed with Kindness, is a very immensely popular work. Women Killed with Kindness. A pathetic story of domestic life. That's the story. The Fair Maid of the West, a melodrama. So we have seen Thomas Haywood, Thomas Middleton, James Shirley, Philip Massenger, John Webster, John Ford, Francis Beaumont, John Fletcher. Okay, we have seen all these guys. So thank you. Hope you